answer a question that was also in the chat that may have been missed.
Yes.
The one that speaks about, okay, I'll just read the question. I agree there is massive scope for using AI and answer some big questions in South African ecosystems and biodiversity. But how much, about much of the basic data is in private hands? How do we persuade them to give the data to use? That's actually one of the challenges that we have come across in terms of accessing data. It's usually owned, I'll speak for like in terms of ecology, sometimes the data is owned by people in Europe and not people here in Africa. They're the ones who own the data, and to access it, you have to go through a very, very long process. And sometimes it's very difficult unless you know someone who can get you that data. So I think that's another thing in to deal with some of the challenges that we face, making data easily accessible. Even with some of the government institutions, because I remember when I was doing my weather data study, I had an issue with the South African Weather Service also trying to get some of that data from them as well. And I thought that it's some data that should be available as a researcher, but it was a bit of a challenge, and my supervisor had to go through the bag and try and find that data for me. So I think access to data is very important, and I think that's what holds us back, especially when it comes to making models, because sometimes the data is incomplete. And sometimes the data is there somewhere, but it's just not being digitized. That's the other issue, especially when it comes to temperature data. It's there, but it's not being digitized, or someone is just not giving access to it.
Do the government institutions actually have enough of the kind of data that you need? Do you know? Can you get a sense of that?
Speaking for myself, I think also the other thing is when it comes to data, it's also expensive to collect and maybe put together. So sometimes I think there is data now for the past few years, because I think it has become cheaper to collect data and everything. You won't be able to get anything long term. And if you're going to be doing models, you do need long-term data as well. So I think that's where the challenge is as well.
Yes, I've often heard that we don't have enough data. I mean, obviously there are areas where we have big data to work with, but there are lots of areas where we lack data, and the institutions and processes don't seem to exist for the collection of that data so that they can be modeled, so that we can actually have efficient prediction and planning. Bruce Maladu, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think Eleanor is asking a very, very good question. It's a very complex question that needs to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. So during the period of 2020, 2022, where we had to deal with a pandemic, there was a lot of data that was very, very relevant to modeling and predictions that were in the hands of private stakeholders. And of course, there were a lot of interactions between us that were working in government work streams, the public and the private sector. So as a result of these interactions and existing relationships, we did get a lot of data from the private sector, especially from the hospital sector. There were other relationships, for instance, with telecoms and cell phone companies that provided data to help us understand mobility, because in the context of COVID-19, how people move is very, very important. But there were also attempts that were unsuccessful. For instance, I remember writing a proposal to APSA. Their ATM data was very, very valuable because it gives us an understanding of where people moved and where they were moving to, which areas people were moving away from or going to. And ATM data was very valuable. But, you know, even though some of the stakeholders within APSA found the project very interesting, at the end of the day, they didn't release any data. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. where unfortunately the private stakeholder has to find value. They think in terms of, you know, adding value to the chain.
Right.
That's how they think. They have a very, very, I would say, I wouldn't like to call it narrow, but they have a very well-defined view as to what it means to share data. And also, very importantly, they have a very, very strong sense that data is extremely valuable. They know the value of data. So it's a very complex process where negotiations need to take place, contracts need to be signed, non-disclosure agreements need to be signed, and it really is a problem that needs to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. And it's a complex one, and scientists, my opinion is that scientists, together with government stakeholders and universities, need to engage actively. I mean, we should not assume that because they're private stakeholders, they will never share. But there are ways somehow through which we can actually be successful. Sometimes we'll fail, there's no question about it. But sometimes we can succeed, and one needs to, you know, try at least and try to generate a narrative that may that these stakeholders may be amenable to, so that they see some long-term benefit for them. Because unfortunately, we can't pay for it. We don't have mechanisms to pay for the data. So you have to really create a narrative that they may find valuable to them, that not necessarily can be monetized, but they may find valuable in the long term. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. I don't think there is a blanket approach that you can apply and then you get data. It's really complicated.
Right. No, that's very interesting. Sam Mashele, do you know what the situation is with health data in general? In what areas is sufficient data being collected in the health sector? Or nutrition, in the nutritional sector?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a problem also about data, because in some cases, the data that is collected, it might not be maybe, you know, collected in the right way and so forth. In some cases, it's not actually collected, because I'm sitting also in the provincial government in this committee of health, where we're looking also at different hospitals and all these kind of things and see the kind of data. Because another thing we also said to them was that let's basically look at the data and make sense of the data and see maybe that data should actually influence the policies at the end of the day. Because in some cases, they're sitting with this kind of data, they're not doing anything with this kind of data. They don't even have maybe the means to analyze that particular data. So we said, let's basically come in and look at the data that you have and see whether we can analyze that. And ultimately that then should influence the policies, because you've got that kind of data. But in most cases, you find that the data is not, you know, collected in the right way. And maybe in some cases, the data is basically missing and all that, which is a huge thing, because if you want to change things, to influence things, you need to have data so that you can make decisions based on that particular data. So if you don't have the correct data, then you're not going to be able to make the correct decisions going forward. And this is another thing. Just also another thing, I think I see in the chat where they're talking about vaccines, drugs are not bulletproof, can African traditional plant-based medicines or feed used as alternative for animal health. So this is another area, because if you looking at some of these things, you'll find that in most cases, these animals have been vaccinated, they are being given hormones and all this. And some of these hormones would actually now also be part of in the adipose tissue of some of these animals. Then what happens? We eat some of these animals, and therefore we ingest some of these hormones, and therefore it influences also our health. And that's why also maybe other people would move away from some of these things. Like for instance, in some cases, even the eggs that you buy today, when you look at it, inside it, like, the white part of it is like just water and so forth, because of the fact that the kind of feed that was given to these animals, and the fact that they are always being injected even with antibiotics, hormones and all that, even growth hormone for them to grow even faster. That will find expression also in our health. And that's why most people also are trying to move away from some of these things. Some are trying to go organic, and you go to some of the shops, they will try to guarantee you to say that there were no hormones in this particular product given to these animals and so forth, so that we try to manage our health at the end of the day, because taking quite a number of these drugs given to these animals because of maybe the fact that they want to make a lot of money, give hormones, chicken, whatever, would grow within a few weeks, is a huge whatever, and so on. And we ingest some of these things. This would actually affect our health and others. And then it's important then to look at these things. Maybe as the chart actually says, maybe looking at some traditional plants to feed these animals. But obviously some people are in business. When you may be doing this, then it takes a long time for these animals to grow and so forth. And as a result, you're not making that amount of money that you're supposed to make, because this is driven by, money and greed and all these kind of things. And in some cases, people cut corners, and this now find expression in our health. And that's why some of these things we need to say them, so that people know about these things, and they get to protect maybe themselves from some of these things, and get to ask some questions around these things, where what you are eating and so forth. Maybe in some cases, even the pesticides given to some of these crops, and they might find expression also, and so forth and so forth. Are they maybe organic kind of pesticides, or the other chemically synthetic kind of pesticide that could find expression in your food and all that, and therefore affect your health? And that's why many people are sick today, because of some of these chemicals that we find in the hormones, the drugs and all that, and it affects people's health. And that's basically my take on that question. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. When you say that it matters how data is collected, you mean with complete details, such as where and when?
Yes, yeah, the complete details, so that you get all the details in the data. And maybe we've even gotten in and say that maybe let's come up with a digital way of you storing this kind of data, the way you're supposed to actually store the data. We can assist you, because today we've got the latest 4IR methods to deal with this kind of data, to avoid a situation. In some cases, the data is missing. Somebody has taken this, there's no data for this, and then it's difficult to then ultimately make a decision. But as you rightfully say, you've got to have all that kind of information, when this happens, whatever, which period, and all these kind of things and so on, so that one can be able to ultimately make an informed decision going forward. Thank you.
Right. Maybe I can just mention that we have a category for data for research, the NSTF Cell 32 Awards. It's a specific award for data sets that are well managed and curated and open access as well. So if you know of people who manage their data efficiently, please have them nominated. The call for nominations is opening on the 1st of November. A question for Mtokozisi Moyo and Prof. Mashele on remote sensing and Earth observation data use in research. Is access to these research tools an important constraint? And if so, why and how can we use these tools to link the research to relevant SDGs? This is from Gordon Branson.
All right, I'll attempt to answer that. When it comes to remote sensing data, I think that some of the best data that is available from all the different kinds of data sets that you can have. I think that's one of the data that is readily available. But going back to what has been said about how data is being collected, the biggest issue is like there's no way of standardizing like different data sets. So different people collect things differently. And also things like the resolution as well is also important, because sometimes you may need a fine scale. Sometimes a broad scale is enough, but sometimes you may need a very fine scale, and that data is actually not available for certain applications. So yes, it is a very important tool that we can use. And it's also, I can say, cost effective, because you just download the data and you just work on a computer. You don't have to go out and try and collect all of that. So I think it's relevant and it's very important to answering a lot of the questions. But I guess the challenges with that is scale, as well as I can say standardization of formats in which that data is found.
Thank you, Dr. Zizi. I want to ask you and Bruce Maladu whether you have worked with SANSA, the South African National Space Agency, in collecting data, and especially with their remote sensing that they're doing.
I haven't worked with them, but I know that they do have data, but I haven't worked with them because most of the time I'm doing data for like a scale of Africa. So I just get data sets that are mostly for Africa, not just South Africa.
So we've been working with satellite data for a number of years now, in different contexts and different applications, which are basically now drifting towards public health and global health problems. But we typically take the data from the European Space Agency and NASA. Their satellites are scanning Africa on a regular basis, and they provide their data for free and in formats that we've learned how to use and process with artificial intelligence. So we've have had quite a number of projects and masters and some PhD students based on that data. I've had interaction with SANSA over the years. I think we've discussed sensors and things like that, but as I said, most of the work that we've done in this space really comes from the ESA and NASA in terms of the data collection.
Right. Thank you very much for those answers. Do you think SANSA must be better supported? I mean, I don't know if we have anyone in the audience. I don't expect so. But do you think our own National Space Agency should be better supported in order to do work more relevant to South Africa, to scan South Africa more intensively?
Can I come in here?
Yes, please.
So, I mean, as a team that has been working with satellite data, I only can say that satellite data is a gold mine of information that overall is not being tapped into sufficiently. That's very, very clear. And not just in South Africa, globally, I think. And different countries have used satellite data more or less, and there are fluctuations. But all in all, I think it's fair to say that satellite data is not used enough globally in general and in South Africa in particular. I think I can vouch for that. It's a tremendous resource, absolutely tremendous. And it really basically covers a tremendously wide range of applications that are related to the SDGs, whether it is food security, whether it is livelihood based, whether it is public health, population movements. It's really a tremendous amount of applications that one can. And of course, enhanced resolution is always good. European Space Agency has a very detailed description of the space resolution for different kinds of data sets. And of course, if there were to be a South African specific effort that would look into some of the scanning with high resolution, I think that would be beneficial. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I'm sure you could actually identify showcases where resolution would profit, would enhance resolution would be very beneficial to whatever study. I can see, you know, projects in food security that would profit greatly from enhanced resolutions. So yeah, and obviously, you know, this would be something that would benefit South Africans more if the scanning of South Africa would be made in a more refined way in terms of a spatial resolution. So, but again, I think this needs to be given to the expert. I'm sure there are showcases to that would support the idea of enhancing resolution in certain applications.
Right. Thank you very much for that answer. With that, we're coming to the time where we can wrap up. I'm sure that everyone is very tired, especially the speakers. I thank you, first of all, very much for the time you've made and the sharing of your expertise in such an eloquent way, and that you've stayed for the question and answer session and have given such insightful answers. What we will do after this is that Heather Erasmus will be writing up the proceedings. We will be editing the video so that the individual speakers can be accessed quickly. And with your permission, speakers, we'll put your slideshows on the website. And our media release writer will be capturing the main issues and possibly conclusions that come from this discussion forum, of course, together with tomorrow's talks and discussions. And so I think there are a number of things that we can recommend or emphasize to the powers that be, the authorities in various situations. I think one of the parts of government that we have to engage is the monitoring and evaluation department. But we still need to digest all of what was said today and look at aspects that need following up. For me, certainly education is part of that as well. Just giving some advice on the importance of basic sciences. We must get learners to do physical science and mathematics and or life sciences. It's all crucial for the future of science in South Africa. Can I give each of you a final word, something that sums it up, for your reaction to the discussion? Let's start with Mtokozisi.
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to share my work. I didn't really consider myself an expert, but this was actually a good learning experience as well for me. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
It's only a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ntokozisi, for participating in this. And it certainly was very insightful what you presented. Prof. Bruce Maladu is saying that apologies, we're having connectivity problems at WITS. Oh, good luck with that. How I wish that CERN could solve these problems of connectivity. And Professor Sam Mashele, what would you be a final message for us?
Thank you, Chair. I think from my side, I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity, and also the organizers for organizing this whole discussion. I think it was insightful from where I am standing. And of course, I think we should encourage this kind of discussion as we try by all means to even push, as you've rightfully said, the fact that students should consider, not even consider, maybe to make sure that our students actually take your basic sciences as one of their subjects, because if we want to grow even the country, the economy, so that we don't just consume knowledge from somewhere, but we produce knowledge as a country and be able to play an important role as we move forward. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Okay, with that, I want to close the discussion, except Bruce Malado, you seem to be present still. Do you want to say a final word?
Yeah, sorry, we are having intermittent problems here, so I get kicked out every 20 minutes or so. I really want to thank the NSTF. I think this is an amazing interaction, and it really goes along the lines of what national and global stakeholders are trying to engage with. We need the engagement between researchers and of different kind of disciplines, UN, WHO, and many other international stakeholders to really enhance the ability to model and predict problems and issues that are of global importance beyond our research. So I think I'm very happy to see this, and I'm really looking forward to the press release, and we will try to also have CERN propagate the press release and other stakeholders as well.
Fantastic. That would be absolutely great. Thank you very much, Professor Malado. From Gordon Branson, just a final contribution to enable basic sciences. Earth Blocks offers a code-free interface to Google Earth Engine, a multi-petabyte catalog of satellite imagery and geospatial data sets with planetary scale analysis capabilities to detect changes in trends, in map trends. And you can have a look at the link to YouTube there. Thank you very much, Gordon, and thank you for your input during this discussion. Right, Vilna says, thank you for participating, making your voice heard. Watch your mailbox for news and feel free to participate in NSTF activities where applicable. Hope to see you tomorrow again, and note the program for tomorrow is there on the chat.